She lost her daughter on a Tuesday morning 58 years ago, in this very hospital. The father picked up the baby, made one promise and walked out the door. She never saw either of them again. For 58 years she searched. No money, no connections. Nothing but a photograph folded soft at the seams and a refusal to stop. Somewhere in that same city, a boy she had never met was building a billion-dollar empire with her daughter's name buried inside his own. So she did the only thing she could. She took a job folding sheets in the largest hospital in Salt Lake City and showed up every single morning, believing that if her daughter's son was alive somewhere in this world, one day he would pass through somewhere she was standing. 2 floors above the laundry room, a billionaire was dying. His children were already in the building, not to save him but to secure what he would leave behind. Neither of them could give blood. Wrong type. Incompatible. The only compatible donor in the entire hospital was the old woman doing laundry on the 2nd floor. She filled out the intake form. The compatibility test came back positive. And then the nurse read the patient name aloud the way nurses read names they do not know, quickly, without wait. Reeves Celestine Morrow. She stopped writing. She thought, it is a name. People share names. This means nothing. Then she thought Morrow. The father's name had been Darnell Morrow. She did not know who the patient was. She only knew his name. And his name had just broken open something she had kept locked for 58 years. Stay with me, because what happened next in that hospital room was not luck, and it was not coincidence. It was a name carried through the dark until it finally came home. She was 73 years old. Her knees hurt. Her hands were good. Her coworker Paulette had asked her once why she never retired. Odessa said, I'm not finished yet. She folded a sheet with the precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times and moved on to the next one. 2 floors up, Wesley Celestine Morrow was running a board meeting that would have been more accurately described as a controlled demolition. 58 years old. 6 feet. The kind of build that comes from a youth of physical work, not a gym. His voice in a boardroom was quiet. This was more frightening than loudness, and everyone around that table understood it. Morrow Energy Group. $8.4 billion in clean energy infrastructure across 11 states. Built from nothing. Built by one person who had started with $1,200 at 23 and had not stopped moving since. What no one in that boardroom knew was that Wesley had left his father's house at 17 with a garbage bag and a bruise across his left shoulder that took 3 weeks to fade. The bag had contained a change of clothes, $40, and a single piece of paper on which his father, in one of his cleaner moments, had written his son's full name, Wesley Celestine Morrow. He had asked once, around age 8, why the middle name was Celestine. Darnell had said it was a name that deserved to be kept. Nothing more. Wesley had learned early not to ask things twice in that house. He had carried the name the way you carry a thing you do not understand, not proud of it, not ashamed of it. Just his. One of the few things that were. He had 2 children, Paxton, 34, and Sable, 31. Both raised in wealth he had built from nothing. He had given them everything he never had, and somewhere in the giving, they had learned to mistake comfort for birthright. He was in the middle of a sentence about the Wyoming grid contract when the pain arrived. Left side. Sharp and total. The kind that does not negotiate. The room went sideways. His hand found the edge of the table. He heard someone say his name. Then he heard nothing. The diagnosis was a cardiac event requiring emergency intervention. His blood type was AB negative. Less than 1% of the population. The hospital blood supply had 3 units, not enough. Without additional donor blood, the next 12 hours were a problem nobody in the surgical team was comfortable describing in plain language to the family. The family arrived 40 minutes after he was admitted. Paxton came in first. His suit was the kind that required a specific tailor and a specific address, and he had taken the time to wear it properly despite the emergency, which told you something about Paxton Morrow that nothing else needed to add. He went directly to the nurse's station and asked about the will. He used different language, something about power of attorney and medical directives, but Dr. Verna Osei, who had been a physician for 26 years and had heard this conversation before, understood what he was actually asking. Sable arrived 12 minutes later, holding the phone to her ear, already talking to someone about asset protection, her voice low and controlled like that of a person who has been planning for this possibility longer than the emergency itself had existed. Dr. Osei explained the blood type situation. Neither Paxton nor Sable could donate. The results confirmed it within minutes. Paxton asked how serious the shortage was. Dr. Osei told him. There was a silence in which both of Wesley's children processed this information and arrived at a calculation that had nothing to do with grief. And Dr. Osei watched their faces while they did it and kept her own expression professional. She put out the hospital-wide alert immediately after leaving that room. Rare blood type needed. AB negative. All staff to be screened. Compensation available. She posted it in every break room. Every staff corridor. She sent it to every department. In the laundry room on the second floor, Odessa was folding a fitted sheet, the hardest kind, the one that defeats most people. When Paulette came back from break and said there was a notice up, Odessa read it. AB negative. She knew her type. She had given blood twice before, years ago, at community drives. She had been told she was AB negative both times and that it was rare and that she should always tell doctors when asked. She folded the sheet. She set it on the cart. She took off her gloves. I'll be back in an hour, she told Paulette. She did not run. She was 73 and her knees would not permit running. And besides, Odessa Came had never been a woman who ran toward things. She walked toward them, steadily, with intention. She went to the donor desk on the third floor and said, I saw the notice. I am AB negative. The nurse looked up. Are you a patient here? No, Odessa said. I work in laundry, second floor. But I am AB negative and I would like to help if I can. In the processing room, the compatibility test came back positive. The nurse told her. Odessa nodded. She signed the forms and was efficient and calm, and she was doing what she had always done. Moving through necessary tasks with her whole attention on what was in front of her. Then Dr. Osei came in to confirm the match. She sat across from Odessa with the patient file open and began the standard confirmation, reading the information aloud. She said, I am confirming the match for patient Morrow. First name Reeves. Middle name. She paused. She looked at the file. She said, middle name Celestine. Last name Morrow. Odessa stopped breathing. Not dramatically. She simply stopped, the way a room stops when the electricity cuts. Everything still functioning for the moment it takes to understand that something has changed. Dr. Osei looked up. Are you all right? Odessa did not answer immediately. She reached into the left breast pocket of her uniform. She took out the photograph she had carried every day for 58 years. Worn at the folds, the creases pale from handling, but the image still clear. A young woman, 22 years old, laughing with her whole face at whoever stood behind the camera. Odessa held it on her palm. She said, Celestine. That was my daughter's name. The room held that. Dr. Osei looked at the photograph, then at the name in the file. She said carefully, It is an unusual name. Odessa said, Yes, it is. She put the photograph back. She folded her hands. She said, I would still like to proceed with the donation. She lay in the donor room with her arm extended and felt the needle go in and watched the dark thread of herself begin to move through the tube, and she let herself think. She thought about Celestine, about the morning she went into labor, how in the very last hour Celestine had looked at her with a clarity that had frightened Odessa at the time, the particular clarity of a person who knows what is coming, and said, Mama, whatever he calls the baby, make sure my name is somewhere in it. Odessa had said, You're going to tell him yourself. Celestine had not answered. She thought about Darnell Morrow standing at that bed, holding the boy, saying, I will take care of him, and walking out, and the years after, every letter, every dead end, every city, Morrow. His last name is Morrow. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She had used her tears for Celestine a long time ago, in the years when grief was still fresh enough to need water. What she felt now was older and quieter than tears. A door that had been closed for 58 years, very slightly coming open. When Dr. Osei returned to check on her, Odessa asked one question. How old is the patient? Dr. Osei paused. Patient information. But something in this woman's face stopped her. 58, she said. Odessa did the math. Her daughter died 58 years ago. She reached into her pocket and held out the photograph. She said, "This is my daughter. She died giving birth in this hospital. The father took the baby and told me he would raise the child. His name was Darnell Morrow." Dr. Osei looked at the photograph, then at Odessa. Then she excused herself. She went to Reeves' file. Third page. Emergency intake from years ago. Father, Darnell Morrow. Deceased. Place of birth, Salt Lake City, Utah. She sat at her desk for a moment. Then she went back. She said, "I think you should be in the room when he wakes up." Paxton saw her first. He was coming out of the family consultation room when Dr. Osei appeared in the corridor with the laundry aide at her side. An elderly woman in a green uniform, unhurried, her hands folded in front of her. Her posture the posture of a woman who has spent a lifetime being told she does not belong in rooms and has decided to belong in them anyway. Paxton stepped directly into their path. He said, "Who is this?" Dr. Osei said, "This is Odessa Came. She is the compatible donor. She saved your father's life this morning." Paxton looked at Odessa, at her uniform, at her age, at the folded hands and the straight back and the absence of apology in her face. He processed all of it in the way men like Paxton process people they have already categorized. He said, "That's very kind. We will make sure she is properly compensated. She can go back to work." Odessa did not move. Dr. Osei said, "Ms. Came will be present when Mr. Morrow regains consciousness. That is a medical decision and it is not open to discussion." Sable appeared from the consultation room doorway. She had her phone in her hand and the expression of someone who had been interrupted mid-calculation. She looked at Odessa with the same swift assessment her brother had made, arrived at the same conclusion in half the time, and added the particular sharpness that comes from fear wearing the face of contempt. She said, "This woman is a hospital employee. She has no standing to be in our father's private suite. Whatever she contributed this morning, she was compensated for it. That is the end of her involvement here." Odessa looked at Sable. She had looked at women like Sable before, women who had been given so much for so long that they had quietly forgotten the difference between what they owned and what they were owed. She felt no anger looking at her. She felt something closer to recognition. Afraid, she thought. That is what afraid looks like when it has money to stand behind. She said quietly and without heat, "I am going to wait by that door. When he wakes up, I would like 2 minutes of his time. If he asks me to leave after those 2 minutes, I will leave. That is all I am asking." Sable said, "You are not asking anything. You are a hospital employee and I am." Dr. Osei said, "Ms. Whitmore." Sable said, "It is Ms. Morrow. And this woman does not belong on this floor." Odessa said nothing. She had been told she did not belong in places her entire life. She had learned a long time ago that the people who said it were never right and that the most effective response was to simply remain standing where you were. She remained standing where she was. Paxton tried a different approach. He lowered his voice into something that was meant to sound reasonable and said, "Look, we appreciate what you did. We do. But you have to understand that our father is in a vulnerable state and we are trying to protect him from." Dr. Osei said, "From the woman whose blood is keeping him alive." Paxton stopped. The corridor was very quiet for a moment. Then the monitor alarm sounded from inside the room. Not a crisis tone. A change. The rhythm shifting, strengthening, finding a new steadiness. He was waking up. She stood near the door. Paxton and Sable were at the bedside immediately, performing the relief of children who are relieved for reasons other than love. Dr. Osei stood to the left, watching the monitors. A nurse adjusted something near the forestand. Wesley Morrow opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling first, the way people do when they return from unconsciousness, orienting, locating, establishing that the world is still in its expected positions. Then he looked at his children, and something moved through his face that was not quite what Paxton and Sable needed it to be. Not the softness of a man grateful to see family. Something more careful, more tired. Then his eyes moved to the woman near the door. She had not moved. She was standing with her hands folded and her back straight in the green laundry uniform, watching him with an expression he could not name. It was not the expression of someone who wanted something from him. It was the expression of someone who had been waiting for a very long time and had arrived somewhere they were not certain was real. He looked at her for a moment. He said, his voice rough from the tube that had been removed an hour before, "Who are you?" Paxton said, "She's nobody, Dad. She's—" Wesley raised one hand. Not commanding, just requesting quiet. He looked at the woman by the door. He said again, "Who are you?" Odessa took one step forward. She reached into her left breast pocket. She took out the photograph. She held it out toward him. Not handing it over, just showing it. And she said, "My name is Odessa Came. This is my daughter. Her name was Celestine. She was 22 years old. She died on a Tuesday morning in this hospital 58 years ago, giving birth to a boy whose father took him before I could hold him." The room was very quiet. Wesley looked at the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. He had never seen a photograph of his mother. Darnell had never shown him one. He had not known there were photographs. He had not known her name was Celestine until this moment. He had thought Celestine was just a name, something his father had chosen from somewhere, for reasons that were never explained. Then he looked at his own hands on the white hospital sheet. Then he looked at Odessa. He said one word, "Celestine." Odessa said, "Yes." He said, "That is my middle name." Odessa stood very still. When she spoke, her voice was steady, the way it was steady when she said hard things. Not because they did not cost her, but because she had learned that some truths require you to hold yourself together in order to deliver them properly. She said, "I know. I think your father gave it to you. It was the last thing my daughter asked for, that wherever you went, you would carry her name somewhere inside your own." She paused. She said, "I think it may have been the only honest thing he ever did for either of you." Wesley looked at her. He was 58 years old. He had run from a man at 17 with $40 and a bruise that took 3 weeks to fade. He had built an empire out of nothing and had never told anyone where nothing looked like. He had carried a middle name his whole life without knowing whose name it was, and had sometimes, in the particular loneliness of late nights in buildings that bore his name, wondered why it felt like it meant something. Now he knew. He said, "Where have you been?" Odessa said, "Looking for you. Every year. Every city I lived in. I showed her photograph to more people than I can count. Nobody ever knew her. Nobody could tell me where Darnell had gone." She said, "I took this job at this hospital 11 years ago because it is the largest hospital in Salt Lake City, and I thought if you were alive somewhere in this country, one day you might pass through somewhere I was standing." She said, "I have been 2 floors below you every morning for 11 years. The room held this." Wesley lay still. He was not a man who cried easily or often. He had learned early that tears were a luxury that unsafe places could not afford, and the learning had gone so deep it had become structure. But something was moving through him now that he did not have a container for. Something that had been waiting since he was 4 years old and stopped asking about the woman his father refused to name. He said, "She wanted me to have her name." Odessa said, "She wanted you to have a piece of her, so that wherever you went you would not be completely alone." He said, "I didn't know." Odessa said, "I know you didn't." He said, "I have been carrying her my whole life and I didn't know." Odessa said, "She has been with you the whole time." He put his hand over his face. Paxton said, "Dad." Wesley said, from behind his hand, quietly and absolutely, "Leave us." Sable said, "Dad, you don't know who this woman is. You don't know what she wants. She could be." Wesley moved his hand. He looked at his children with the expression his board of directors recognized. Not loud, not threatening, simply finished. He said, "I know exactly who she is. She is the only family I have ever had who was not lying to me. Leave us. Both of you." They left. The door closed. And for the first time in 58 years, Odessa Came was in a room with her daughter's son. Wesley asked the first thing he had wanted to know his whole life. He said, "What happened to her?" Odessa looked at him. She said, From the beginning? He said. From wherever you need to start. She started from the beginning. He told her about Darnell. Not all of it, but enough. The apartment. The unpredictability of the violence. The morning at 17 when he packed the garbage bag and walked out and made himself not look back. He said, I spent 40 years proving something to a man who never deserved the effort. Odessa listened with her whole body still. She said, Your mother would have gotten you out of that apartment before you were 5 years old. He looked at her. She said, Celestine was not a woman who would have allowed her child to be raised in fear. I raised her to fight for the people she loved. She would have fought. He said, What was she like? Odessa said, That laugh in the photograph, that was her whole personality. Loud about joy. So public about it, like she didn't know you were supposed to keep some of it to yourself. She said, She was going to be a nurse. Enrolled here. 3 months from starting when she found out she was pregnant. She was not afraid. I was afraid. She was not. She said. On the morning she went into labor, in the last hour, she looked at me with a clarity I did not understand at the time. She said, Mama, whatever he calls the baby, make sure my name is somewhere in it. So the baby always knows where he came from. I told her she was going to tell him herself. She did not answer. Wesley looked at the photograph. He said, She knew. Odessa said, Yes, I think she did. He said, She died thinking about me. Odessa said, She died thinking about you. He put his face in his hands. And what came was not something he could redirect or build a wall around. It came from the 4-year-old who had stopped asking about his mother because asking cost too much. From the 17-year-old with the garbage bag. From the man who had put his name on $8 billion of the world and had still felt, in the quietest moments, like a person without an origin. He was not yet finished breaking when the door opened. Paxton came in first. They had been busy in the hallway. The lawyer had a leather folder and the manner of a man who charged rates that required a folder. He stood beside Paxton with his hands clasped and his face arranged into something meant to communicate reasonableness. Paxton said, Dad, we need to talk about what is happening here. This woman, we don't know who she is. We don't know what she wants. She shows up with a photograph and a story, and you are in a vulnerable medical state and... Wesley looked at his son. He said, Paxton. Paxton said, Dad, I'm trying to protect. Wesley said, I know what you are trying to protect. I built it. I know what it is worth and I know what you think it is worth. And I need you to hear me say this clearly so there is no confusion later. He said, This woman gave her blood this morning without knowing who I was. She did not come to this hospital because of what I have. She came to this hospital 11 years ago because she was looking for me. And she found me, not because of what I built, because of who I am, because of whose son I am. He said, That is something that has never happened to me before in my life. He said, So when you stand in front of me with a lawyer to discuss my vulnerable medical state, I need you to understand that you are not protecting me. You are protecting your position. Those are not the same thing. Sable said, She is a stranger. Wesley said, She is my grandmother. The word sat in the room. Sable opened her mouth and closed it. Paxton looked at the lawyer. The lawyer looked at his folder. Wesley said, I want you both to go home. I will call you when I am discharged. We will have a different conversation then about many things. But right now I am asking you to leave my room. Paxton said, This isn't. Wesley said, Paxton, go home. They went. When the door closed, Odessa said, You did not have to say it like that. He said, I'm not going to pretend they weren't doing what they were doing. She said, They are afraid. Afraid is ugly. It is not final. She said, Darnell was afraid too. He made every wrong choice available to him. But even afraid, even broken, he gave you her name. That was the only honest thing he ever did. And it was enough to bring you here. She said, Angry is expensive. I stopped spending it a long time ago. Wesley looked at her. This woman who had every reason in the world to be hard, who had been told to go back to work this morning by the children of the man she had just saved, and he was quiet. Then he said, "When I leave this hospital, I am coming to your table." She looked at him. He said, "You are going to tell me everything about her. Everything you have been saving. I want all of it." Odessa said, "I have been saving it for 58 years. He said, "Then I will bring time." She put her hand on his. She said, "I have you now." She said, "I am not going anywhere." Paxton and Sable came back on the third day. Both conversations were difficult and honest and did not resolve everything. The things between them needed more than a hospital room could hold. But they have begun. Wesley had decided that beginning was what was available right now. He was discharged 9 days later. 3 weeks after discharge, he came to Odessa's apartment on the west side of Salt Lake City. It was small and orderly. A window that caught the morning light. A kitchen table with 4 chairs, 2 of which had never been used. On the wall, framed now in 8 by 10 Celestine. Her whole face laugh filling the room. He sat at the table. She made eggs and toast and coffee from a pot that had been heating since 6 in the morning. He asked about everything. What Celestine was like. How she moved. What she argued about. What she was afraid of. Odessa told him. 58 years of saved details. The way Celestine tilted her head when she was thinking. The old church song she hummed while she cooked. The way she made people feel that whatever they were saying was the most important thing she had heard all day. The way she could not pass a child crying without stopping. She told him the hard things too. That in the last weeks of the pregnancy Celestine had gone quiet in a way she never had before, and Odessa had thought it was just the weight of waiting. She understood it differently now. Wesley sat across the table and received all of it. He just listened. The way a person listens when something they have been waiting for their whole life has finally arrived and they do not want to miss a single word. When she finished, he looked at the photograph for a long time and said, "She would have gotten me out of that apartment." Odessa said, "Before you were 5 years old." He said, "I know." He said, "I want to start a foundation, maternal health, here in Utah, named for her, named for you, the Celestine Came Foundation." He said, "She gave me her name. I want to give her name back somewhere people can see it. Somewhere it does something." Odessa looked at her hands on the table. She said, "She would have thought that was too much." He said, "She would have been right. But she is not here to argue about it, and we are, so." Odessa laughed. It was the first time Wesley had heard her laugh. And when he heard it, he understood immediately where he had gotten his own from. The one he kept for rooms where it was safe, the one that used his whole face. The same sound, the same quality. He went still. Odessa saw his face and she knew. She said, "Yes." He said, "She laughed like that." Odessa said, "You laugh like that." They sat at the kitchen table in the morning light with Celestine on the wall between them, and neither of them said anything for a while, because some things do not need more words than the ones already in the room. 6 months later, at the opening of the Celestine Came Foundation, maternal health care for underserved communities across Utah, a dedicated ward at Mercy Heights Hospital, funded and named, Wesley stood at the podium and said, "My mother gave me her name. I did not know whose name it was. I carried it through a garbage bag and $40 and every building I ever put my name on. I was never alone. I just did not know yet who was with me." Odessa was in the front row. She was wearing a dress instead of a uniform. Her hands were in her lap. Her back was straight. On the wall behind the podium, in letters 3 feet high, Celestine Came Foundation. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at Wesley. He looked back. And between them, 22 years old and laughing, already gone before any of this was possible, already present in every moment of it, was Celestine. She had asked for her name to travel with her son wherever he went. It had, all the way back to where it started. There is one question I want to leave you with. Not about the Healthcare Foundation. Not about Paxton and Sable. About the person in your life who kept showing up without you knowing the full reason why. Who chose to be in the room. Who carried your name somewhere close when you had no idea they were holding it. Write their name in the comments right now. Just their name. That is enough. That is everything. And if this story found something real in you, share it with the person you would want to find you if you were lost. Because somewhere out there, someone has your name in their pocket. And they are not finished yet. See you in the next story.